Welcome back to the More People Podcast. There's more beneath the surface of this topic than perhaps you might think. Thanks for joining us. Andrew Fitzmaurice from More People, and joined today by Wayne Grylls from BALI.
Hi.
Not the place.
Not the place.
I'll let you do the intro as to who BALI actually are. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, so BALI is the British Association of Landscape Industries. We're a trade association for landscape contractors, garden designers, suppliers to the industry, and also we have a training provider network that's quite extensive as well, delivering training to the sector as well. So that's about the size of our membership. So we're about 950 accredited members that have been through a stringent vetting process, and then probably around another 400 or so students and associate members on top of that.
Nice. So I guess a lot of your members will be our customers, so I guess we share that overlap, obviously.
Yeah.
It ranges in size, though, I'm guessing, significantly from the real big boys through to much smaller entrepreneurial.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, as you say, the larger companies might employ 3,000-4,000 people. We've got a number of those, of course, but there are not huge amounts in the industry. The larger numbers are sort of small to medium size enterprise. And we also have owner managers. So it really doesn't matter where people are at in terms of the vetting process with them. We usually say, or I usually say to them, if you're coming on board as a BALI member, if your filing cabinet is in your kitchen at home and that's where you run your business from, as long as that system works, that's what we're looking for. We're not necessarily looking for ISO 9001 quality management system accreditation. If you've got it, that's great.
Yeah.
But not necessarily a requirement of the criteria. So it's about what works. And to demonstrate that, I usually, say, well, look, if they, as a business, is ordering topsoil for a site, then how do the people on site know that that's the amount that's been ordered? So in other words, if a person's ordered a ton of topsoil, how do the people on site working for that organisation know that when the guy turns up with 10 tonne of topsoil, they need to send it back because they've only ordered 1 tonne type thing? And that usually gets people's mind thinking about, oh yeah, okay, maybe our system isn't quite as watertight as it should be. So that's a good way of kind of demonstrating it at that kind of level, I suppose.
So if we go back a half step, just to really dumb it down, the word landscaping, I guess, means a range of different things, a range of different people. What does it mean in the context of BALI?
Well, it will go from one end of the scale to the other. So we are talking small domestic gardens, right through to public realm, very large landscape schemes, very often almost tapping into civil engineering, particularly on the hard landscaping side. So from that point of view, we are two ends of the scale, from commercial through to domestic. I think we've been very lucky over the years to have a number of award entries put into our awards. And I think the largest one that we ever had, which was a domestic site, was a 37.5 acre formal garden, which was about £9.5 million worth. So that kind of gives you a feel for some of the private domestic gardens, and obviously some of the bigger schemes on the commercial side are much bigger than that as well.
Like lots of things, it's one of those markets that I guess flies under the radar unless you work in it. People have their gardens and they have nice patios and they have nice green spaces, and they spend time in public spaces, which are also really nice, and then they go to developments like Battersea Power Station we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for us and for BALI, part of our lobbying, part of our sort of advocacy role is about trying to describe what that benefit is, and making sure that the landscape industry is included from day one. So I think we very often, fall foul, I think, as an industry, that the buildings in terms of a development actually very often run over budget and run over time. So the landscaping gets hit for what we call value engineering towards the end of a project. BALI and I sit on something called the Environmental Horticulture Group, which is a collaborative group of bodies in the industry. So we have 4 working groups that work within that. One of those is the Planning and Infrastructure Group, which I chair. We've been meeting with the Chief Planning Officer from government to kind of highlight some of these issues, thinking about the government's 1.5 million home target, which we know is not going to be met at the rate that we're going at the moment. So how can we better those green spaces? How can we give somebody a decent green space to look after once their home's been built and they've moved in? Because at the moment, there isn't that kind of standard in there. And very often, someone will get that little sort of rectangular patch of grass, which is very often built on soils that are not particularly great for growing on or in. So yeah, there's a lot of work still to do, but we're getting there. And I think the Chief Planning Officer, realises that, and I think there's a new pathways to planning where they're trying to support the local authority planning officers in understanding the importance of green space. So the green space that connects the buildings that most people would normally talk about.
You touched upon turf, soil, plants come into it, as well as drainage and aggregates and paving. It's the whole
shebang. Yeah, absolutely. So, and the last probably 3 or 4 years, there's been a sort of real movement on the plant health scene, trying to improve plant health in the UK. So working with DEFRA and also the Animal and Plant Health Agency, they've got, I think it's probably about 1,400 pests and diseases listed on their register now, of things that come into the UK generally that obviously are a risk to the plant stock that we have. On the back of that, again, another collaborative project we had was the Plant Healthy Scheme, so certification scheme for businesses that are dealing with plants and that they can show that their business is actually plant healthy in that same way. So that's now taking off quite considerably. It's taken us a few years to get there, but that's now really sort of going from strength to strength as well. So
I guess a lot of other markets that we work in have some volatility to them. It's a bit like the great British weather. If you don't like what it looks like at the moment, wait 5 minutes and it'll change.
Yeah.
And we talked a bit earlier about not resting on one's laurels because there's been a buoyant period, because you don't necessarily know what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
What's your view on the state of the market, state of the industry in a broad sense at the moment?
I think it is a little bit mixed out there. I've been known more recently in various meetings and seminars to be talking about BALI membership. Our membership has remained fairly static, which has been good in the most recent years, particularly on the back of COVID, Brexit. I mean, COVID was just the following year after COVID was a real boom time for the industry. But then we had Brexit and we had the Suez Canal issues with the materials and getting stuck in the canal, etc. And prices just skyrocketing. Things like shipping containers going from £2,500 to £25,000, that kind of thing. More recently, we've had the issue around waste in terms of taking waste off site. So the industry is working really well at trying to keep most materials on site if they can, because the minute it goes off site, you need a waste transfer license and waste carriers and etc. And that has, potentially has gone up by 3,000%. Just for a skip to go to landfill. They've always been in a position where they can actually pivot their business to the market demands and what's happening out there in the economy. It just means that businesses get a bit fitter. Unfortunately, yes, some of those businesses have to lose some people along the way, but not all. But it's about how do they run their business? How do they work on it rather than in it? And how are they looking for the projects that are not necessarily just on that sort of knife edge of, well, actually, do I make a profit or a loss on it type thing? So a lot of people tend to work on their business in that same way. So we, as I say, BALI membership this last year, we've seen actually 23 companies go into liquidation, which is highly unusual. To try and ease things for members, we put in a hardship fund 3 years ago to say, well, actually, if there's a year where your business is struggling, we'll pay your membership fee for you for this year on the basis that you'll continue your membership the year after.
It's quite a common trope, I think, that cash flow is often a reason why businesses go under, not necessarily being unprofitable, but if you can't sustain the cash flow, then you never get to see the profit.
That's it.
Again, in this forum, on our podcasts and at our dinners, we talk about some of the increasing costs of labour, NI, energy, shipping, as you've mentioned. And I often ask the question to the food retailers or the plant retailers, how much of that have they managed to pass on to the end consumer? Are costs being absorbed and people making less money, or are people being able to pass on some of those costs to the end customer?
I think it's a bit of both, Andrew, to be honest. I think, there'll be certain aspects like the national insurance increase, national living wage, real living wage, all of those kind of things that come into play. There'll be even more things, of course, coming in April in terms of employment law and the changes there and what that might mean to a business. So I think our role obviously is to try and help members navigate that, to be able to sort of foresee what's going to happen and how they can work with that. But for example, I mean, some of our members might have local authority contracts, but those local authority contracts might be a 5 or a 10-year contract. And actually, to start increasing the cost because of increased national insurance contributions is not necessarily a clause that's been built in, right. Albeit where new contracts are being negotiated, our members are negotiating those elements of it. So sometimes the business has to soak it up until such time that those contracts come up for renewal. And then they're obviously able to negotiate. Some local authorities are quite empathetic, and they do work with our members to try and sort of piece it between them in some way, shape or form. And there's all sorts of things like that happen across the way. If we talk about chemical use and weed killer and that kind of thing, that's another area that hit a lot of local authorities because they wanted to go chemical free, and tried alternatives, and then realized that maybe they don't work, I wouldn't say as good, but they don't work for as long. Mm-hmm. So some of those alternatives absolutely will kill those weeds, but only for a shorter period of time. So we found that some of those local authorities have moved back to that. But they made this big sort of bold statement originally and saying, we're doing this. And we had reports coming back saying, well, that's an increase of £600,000 a year just to be able to do that. I suppose I like to think of, and I think our members would generally say that they're solution providers, really, working with their client base. And I think that's the way we would see ourselves, as partners, if you like, of the client in that way.
It's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Is it a bit of a poison chalice sometimes then, the paradox almost of you secure a long-term contract that guarantees security for your firm for a period of time, but if costs do move and you aren't able to pass them on and negotiate, that you have to absorb it? Is that quite a common contradiction or debate when a business takes on a contract of that nature?
I think probably the industry's learnt a lot, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years since COVID. Nobody was expecting COVID. We all have sort of force majeure clauses, but nobody really envisaged a pandemic of that kind of scale. And most contractors in the industry would be doing the same. So even if it comes down to competitors on a tender, they're all going to want to kind of make sure that they've got that secure in the bag, moving forward, because nobody really knows what those impacts might be. And
how did you get into the industry? You started out in HR, in the hotel industry, is that right?
I actually started out as a chef.
Wow, okay.
So I'm a trained chef. So I spent 14 years in hotel and catering. So 7 years in the operational side and 7 years in HR. Again, over the years, worked in different businesses. A lot of it's been training and education focused. So when I came out of the hotel industry, I moved into awarding bodies for qualifications and started out my career there in an awarding body for clothing and textile manufacture. We decided to diversify. So we went into really weird and wonderful things like gamekeeping, fish husbandry, animal care, museum and heritage awards, that sort of thing. So that really opened up the door for the business to sort of be a bit more in terms of longevity and have a sort of business moving forward if the manufacture of clothing textiles, as it did, went abroad. I brought 3 companies from the previous owners who were on an earn-out basis. So one was delivering business-linked startup contracts for startup advice to entrepreneurs. The other one was a waste management training consultancy, so moved into waste management for about 5 years. And the third company was a distributive enrolled body under the landfill tax credit scheme, so it was quite related to waste management. Yeah. Following that, I did 2 years in extractives and mineral processing, or quarrying and mining, and then 5 years at Lantra as a land-based awarding body before joining BALI 15 years ago.
And now the landscaping industry has got you. And
so the grass really is greener in landscaping. Yeah, absolutely.
What a way to finish a podcast. We can talk all day, but that's been definitely enlightening. People should check it out if they don't know it. We'll put some links in the description.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Wayne.
Cheers.